What was it like growing up in East Sussex?
It was very idyllic, I think. All the memories I have of being a child and of being at school are basically very good. I was very lucky to have a very happy family, and I think one of the most important things is where I grew up, which is right in the countryside, basically, with a lot of greenery around us and woods and fields and a lot of space. And I suppose, even though it's not that long ago, I think in those days we had a lot more freedom just to run around and do what we wanted and to do our own thing.
How come? Because you can see it right now?
Well, I think nowadays, parents are more wary about that, and they lock their doors and they keep their kids, they like to be sort of watchful of their kids. But I think even like 20 years ago when I was little, we used to run around and do a hell of a lot of things just on our own with our friends. And Tim, who's in the band, I remember sort of, at the age of 3 or 4, hanging out with Tim and his brother Tom. So I think that's a very integral part of who I am and where I come from. And I think it does have an effect on your life, and probably in a way gave me a bigger picture of the possibilities of the world and what you could do.
What do you mean?
Well, because I went to very straight schools, and schools where you did exams and it was very regimented and rigid, and but I think always I was fighting against that. I wanted to do something that was different, and I suppose just the environment where I grew up in may have had an effect on that, and may have altered me mentally. I guess I like adventure and imagination, and I think that the life I have in music really allows me to do that. We go all over the world. We get to create.
Do you mean that you were restricted back then, maybe too much, or not?
No, I think it's the opposite. Okay. I mean, I think the freedom that I had, has definitely had an effect on the rest of my life.
And when did you realize you had a good singing voice? Was it something that came natural, or was it some one moment that you were struck by?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's been a gradual thing. I think most of my life I've loved singing. I've got tapes of me when I was 4 or 5 years old singing into tape recorder, and
what songs?
Sometimes just making up my own songs. I had a little keyboard and I just sing rubbish in there, I am so cool, and just showing off basically. But I liked singing. I liked
hip-hopping more.
Yeah, exactly. When I was at school, I think my teachers or my mum and dad probably worked that out, and so I started doing quite a lot of singing when I was at school, and then really got into pop music. I think quite a young age, listening to things like ABBA and the Beach Boys and Michael Jackson, very, very different types of stuff. But I love singing, and I love trying to copy them and to sing along with the songs, and I kind of loved that feeling that it gave me, and I still do now. And so over the years your influences change, and you learn how to sing better, and you have someone like Tim writing songs for you, which maybe he has you in mind when he writes them, and so gradually you develop this own sound that's really you and uniquely you. And I think that's what's happened to me probably in recent times more than anything else. I've developed my own style of singing.
And when did you realize that you had more, let's say, of your own style? Who were you trying to copy, let's say, at first?
I think
what was your best?
When we started as a band, which was 7 years ago, I probably sounded like a kind of strange blend between, Freddie Mercury and Paul McCartney or something. I knew I had a kind of quite high register voice, I was, but it was a bit kind of derivative or a bit stylized at that point. And then OK Computer came out, and I think every band wanted to sound like Radiohead and be like Radiohead. And I think I probably sounded like Tom York a lot for a long time. But then I think we.
What struck you about that OK Computer? Let's say, was it the music, or was it, let's say, the singing, or?
I think everything about that record is striking. For me, it's the most perfect record that I know. and I never tire of listening to it. You know, just the recording of it, the production of it, the words and the songs and the music, and just the sound, the incredible depth of sound, the breadth of imagination it must have taken to come up with that record. And I think that really was an inspiring record, but I think it also held us back as a band, because I think, you know, we wanted to sound like that. We wanted to sound like OK Computer, and we didn't want to sound like ourselves for a while. And so gradually, you know, probably from listening more to people like the Smiths and Nick Drake and people like that, I began to realise that actually you've got to sing in your own voice and you've got to be yourself more than anything else. And you know, Morrissey, I don't sound anything like, really, but I think he's had as much impact on the way I sing as, let's say, you know, someone like Tom York, who has a much more similar sounding voice. So, you know, over the years, you just learn to sing in your own way, and I think that's what I've managed to achieve recently.
And how is it for you then? Because you sing, let's say, Tim's lyrics.
Yeah.
Is it strange to sing someone else's lyrics, or do you talk about it, or how does it come about?
Well, we do a bit of talking about it, but I think that so much of what Tim writes about in his songs is tied up in all of our lives, and certainly
because you live the same life, more
well,
or
not
less?
Because we live,
now you do.
We're very close friends, and so we see all, you know, the difficulties with the relationships that any of us have in the band, or you know, just the way we feel about the world, or people or friends that we know. And I think all of those things come through in Tim's songs, because they are very honest, and they are you know, written from the heart. He's not trying to pretend to be anyone else other than who he is. And so, you know, sometimes it can be painful. You know, sometimes you feel like a song is about you and you know, a relationship that you've had. A song like She Has No Time, for example, you know, is very distinctively about me and the troubles I had with a girl. But when someone writes so honestly like that, you know, it's a very special feeling to then be able to sing those songs.
But does he know that exactly the feelings you're going through? I
think so. I think that's
because you talk about it a lot.
Well, partly because of that, but I also think that a great songwriter, and I think Tim is a great songwriter, has the ability to see and understand how either he feels or how other people feel, and to put that into a song. You know, and She Has No Time is a good example, because it's not entirely about me. You know, it's also about how Tim's saying, you know, he's been through that similar thing, you know, where a girl has let him down and made him very angry and upset, and you know, he understands the situation I'm in, and that's what the song is saying. It's saying my heart opens up to you when she says she has no time, because, you know, that it's about together we'll get through this with this song, and with our friendship we can get through this and over this. And so, you know, I think that's what a songwriter does, and I think that's also why our songs seem to have reached out to a wider audience, to lots of different types of people. Because
they're really personal.
Because they're so personal,
yeah.
And because, you know, a lot of people take a Keane song and they say, well, that I can relate to that. I can understand what he's talking about there, and it means something within the context of my life, and helps to explain something I'm going through. I mean, the number of people who've come up to us and said, you know, that song. You know, a song like We Might As Well Be Strangers, that was a song that really kind of nursed me through a breakup that I was going through, and that's what the song is about. You know, it's about going through a nasty breakup and the difficulties and the hard times that you face when that happens.
But when did you realise that his songwriting was really, let's say, more than average?
Well, I think that was a few years ago. In fact, the first song that really made me think that was This Is the Last Time, which I think he wrote like 2.5, 3 years ago. I just remember being struck by just how well formed it was, you know.
What was the thing that really struck you then? It was, let's say, the song structure, or?
Well, I think everything. You know, I think when someone, you know, who's very good at something gets into the zone, and, you know, suddenly is able to find a way of doing stuff. Then everything clicks into place, you know. So the words, the lyrics. Well, the lyrics, obviously, the melody, you know, the chord patterns, the structure of the song. Suddenly, everything felt very natural and kind of well-rounded and well-formed. And you know, I think I do remember being struck by that song particularly, thinking that this is definitely a cut above anything he's ever done before. You know, which is really exciting.
Are you into more, let's say, more of lyric writing or songwriting, or maybe Richard is? Are two of you, let's say, also working on it, or just working with Tim's songs?
Well, we do have I mean, I think the input that we have is you know, I mean, when Tim's songs come to us, they're very rough and ready and quite raw. You know, and there's an awful lot that we have to give to the song to make it sound like a Keane song and to make it sound like.
Do you have an example? Because I'm really interested. What
I think, for example, a song like "Everybody's Changing." Mm-hmm. As a band, it took us a long time to get that song right, and I think initially we thought Tim thought it was a bit of a throwaway song. I mean, really did. Yeah. You know, and thought I don't think he felt that we would like it that much. But immediately Richard and I latched onto it and said, "This is a great song," but it took us a long time to get it right. But that's what you do as a band.
What was not right?
Well, we just struggled to make it flow and to sort of have potency and power and stuff. And you know, it's a difficult song to sing as well for a start. But that's the sort of thing that you work through as a band. You know, you try and you try and work together to make the germ of an idea into something much bigger and something that has your own kind of stamp on it. You know. And I think Richard and I have an absolutely vital role in making the songs what they are, purely because, you know, we've never thought about the band as about any one person, but really just about all three of us, and about how we together can make music that really means something to people. You know, and admittedly Tim is you know, the driving force behind that, but I think you know, there are other more sort of complex things that come into play when you create a song and make a song as a band, and I think that's part of the magic of it. You know?
Of course, yeah.
You know, it's difficult to explain those things, and it's probably something we do subconsciously and together. But
the thing is, let's say that's why I ask for a particular song, because maybe then you have in mind what the exact roles were, but. Okay.
Well, with Everybody's Changing, you know, we struggled for a long time to get the right rhythm track for it, and we struggled for a long time for me to really. I mean, that actually was a song. Interesting enough, what we were discussing earlier on with the sound of my voice and getting to be where it was now. That was definitely a song that we worked so hard on, and we had so many discussions back and forth about, you know, how to sing it best. That I think through those discussions, you know, my voice changed and became a different thing, you know, and that's the way it works. So, you know, I mean, it definitely is about all three of us, I think, at the end of the day, and I think that's really important.
Okay, and I think I have some more personal questions for you. What is so good about Freddie Mercury?
What is so good about him?
Yeah, for you.
Well, I think when I was younger, I think I was just. I mean, actually, I got into Queen around the time he died, which was probably a lot of the same for a lot of people. Yeah, and you know, I think it was just the pure, probably the pure. You know, as a kid, you're not sort of concerned with whether something's, you know, naff or camp or whatever. You just look at it in terms of whether it gives you joy and entertains you and says something to you. And I think that was the best thing about Queen, is that, you know, you watch it and you know that, especially with Freddie Mercury, that he's living the music, and he, you know, it's a completely integral part of him, and it gives him joy, and he feeds off it, and that kind of energy is something that's really, I think, really just inspiring for me, and certainly was when I was a bit younger.
But do you look, let's say, like, to people like him for your own stage?
I'm sure it's had an effect, you know.
But are you, let's say, nowadays, are you looking more into it, to trying to make it better or maybe change it, or do you actually, are you busy with it now, or are you just natural? Okay.
Well, I think we're concerned about giving the best show that we can all the time, and so of course you change things, and you know, we've only had a record out for like 8 months, and there's a lot of pressure on us to be a really impressive band in everything that we do, and so of course you're always learning, and you know, I guess we're in a situation where we have to learn fast. So we're always talking about those things and how we can you know, get better as a live band, and how we can get, I mean, certainly with the recording, you know, I think it's important as a band that you always move on. I mean, you know, if you see footage of U2 in their very early days, I mean, they look faintly ridiculous. But and you look at them now, and they're so cool and assured and confident, and that's come through years and years of practice and hard work and moving on, moving forwards. And the same can be said about their albums and their music, you know. Although I guess probably in recent times they probably began to slow down. But I think certainly in their heyday, they were really changing and innovating the way people thought about music and looked at music and listened to music, you know, through their actions and through their records. And
what do you want then Keane to do for the next album? Have you already...
Well, I think that's the only kind of prerequisite, is that we move forwards and we don't just make a pale imitation of the first record. You know, we want to make something that's really fresh and inspires us. And you know, I don't want to be the sort of band who rests on their laurels and says, well, you know, we're happy with the first record, let's just chuck another one out that's the same. And I think Oasis suffered from that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the first record was a fantastically raw and exciting, powerful record, and then I think they became complacent. The second record was good, but from that point on,
good also. But people
were aware that it was that it was good, but it was beginning to become a bit staid, and certainly by the third, fourth, fifth records, you know, it's become almost like a kind of formula, like formulaic music.
But how do you stay away from it? Because it's really hard to do that.
Well, I think you have to be hard on yourselves, and you always have to be looking for new ways of doing things. You know, when we go into the studio, we want to experiment with new stuff, and you know, for example, people ask us about the piano a lot and say, "Do you think that's going to limit you?" Well, I think it's the opposite. I think the piano gives us the chance to do something very different to what most guitar bands do, which at the moment is to go back to sounding like 60s and 70s bands. You know, with the piano we have a chance to really expand on the sounds that it makes. You can do an awful lot to the sound of a piano that you can also do to a guitar, but I think we are at an advantage there. We also love, you know, being in the studio, and we have lots of keyboards, and you know, we want to mess around with the sound of the drums. We don't really know what it's going to sound like, but we know it's going to sound different.
But let's say, are there already some songs written?
There are, and you know, you should ask Tim about this. But I know that he's got a lot of songs that he's written. We've started playing a couple of them. We have a few that we've listened to and thought about, and that's really exciting for us. And I think that you know, it's kind of spurring us on. I think you know, although we're not cocky, I think we're confident that we have enough material, enough stuff to work with to make the next record, even when we get the chance to do it.
Do you know already when you are going to record
No.
it?
Well, we don't know where we're going to... Well, we might record it where we recorded the first record, but I think although we haven't really decided that yet, I think, you know, that's part of the excitement of it, is that you don't really know exactly where you're going to go with something, and exactly how you're going to make it work. And I think that's part of the fun, you know, that we've got ideas, but we don't know whether they'll work. I'm sure new things will come to us when we're in the studio, new songs, new ideas, new sounds. And I don't think we're saying now, we've got 12 songs written, we have a perfect number of songs for a record, we know how we want to make it sound, and we'll just go in there and do it. Because I don't think that would work. You know, I think we're aware, and acutely aware of the fact that people will be expecting something that's bigger and better and different from the first record.
But isn't this a hard pressure on him?
It's the pressure we always put on ourselves anyway. You know, we've always put that pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, but now, especially with such success of the first record, I can imagine that sometimes, I don't know.
The success, the success of the first record. What that allows us to do is spend time making the second record, and
that's it for you then.
and have enough time to do it.
Yeah?
The pressure, the real pressure, is from ourselves to do something that we're proud of, you know, and not to let people down. But you know, that's different from, you know, really sort of concentrating what other people think. We know in our own minds that we have to do something that's special and different, and so, you know, that's what we'll be conscious of. But we've been doing that all our lives anyway as a band. You know, we spent 7 years trying to get a record deal and trying to get anyone to take notice of us, and you know, so we've had to change all the time and adapt. We used to have a guitarist who left the band, you know, and we came to terms with that and changed and adapted, and you know.
Wasn't that the best thing that happened to you in retrospect? Well,
it might have been, you know, it happened to us, so we that was a fact. So we had to move on from there. I'm not sure it was the best thing that ever happened to us. It was very difficult, but you know, I think we are, you know, like I say, we're aware of you know, wanting to do something that is different, and we put pressure on ourselves to do that anyway, and we always have. So that's the only kind of real, you know, premise that we're going to make in the next record with.
I have still 2 questions. Do you still speak to the former guitar player?
We see him occasionally, yeah. I mean, there's no
What
real...
does he think now then of your music?
I think he has a lot of respect for us, and I think, you know, he may even feel slightly gutted about having left the band. But he left the band because, and at a time when it was very hard for us, we'd had a lot of false starts and a lot of people saying, you know, if you do this and that, then you'll get somewhere. And then we did this or that, and we didn't get anywhere.
Okay.
And that's heartbreaking. You know, when you're pouring everything that you have into your music, your soul and your emotions and your money, you know, it becomes hard to take the knocks. And I think he gave up. And I can see why at the time, but I think maybe he would regret that now. I haven't asked him, you know, and I think it's not really my place to do that. But yeah, I mean, we do see him, and you know, we don't have much time as it is, so we don't see him very often. No, but it's, you know, it's all very, yeah, absolutely.
And then, do you believe in God?
Do I believe in God?
Yes.
Not really. No, I don't think I do. I think although I think I'm a kind of a spiritual person in a way. You know, I believe that there's a bit more to life than just kind of, you know, everyday reality. I think there's, I suppose what I feel is that, you know, for example, something like music, it's such a magical thing and such an amazing thing to have, that, you know, it can't be as simple as just, you know, us not living our lives. You know, there's something when we're spiritual about music in its own right. You know, it can take you elsewhere. It can change the way you feel and your mood. And you know, I think that's kind of spirituality that I have. You know, and I think that's really a cool thing. But you know, as for going to church and being religious, no, I'm not really like that.
Okay, no, because you had 7 bad years,
yeah,
and now you think 7 good years will come?
Maybe we break a mirror, isn't that right? If you break a mirror, it's 7 years bad luck.
No,
so
there were 7 good years, 7 bad years in the Bible, and 7
oh, is that
good
right?
years. So that's.
Well,
that's
I hope so. I really hope so. It would be a nice way of thinking of it. You know, I think we felt that when things started to go well for us, that it was about time, you know, because
7 years,
you know, we believed so much in what we were doing, and I think we kept going just because we were bloody minded about it. And you know, I think we felt like it would be nice if something happened. And this year has been a wonderful year for us, you know, and it's lovely that people have connected with what we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.